Welcome back. So now that we return an observable here, replay subject, let's remove this old code, the create user that it was before, and remove v2 here, so we're actually using this new create user. Now the code won't break yet because if I go into the user component, I still just use the create user with the user, so nothing is going to be changed there right now. But right now we are ignoring if there's errors. If we show up an error, we'll just go in and say, well, just hide the dialog, everything probably went well. We're going to change that now. We're going to say we're only going to hide the dialog if we subscribe to this guy now, right? If we subscribe, then we expect to get a user back. So if we go in here, we say user. So we expect that if everything went well, we get a user back. And we can kind of pop up and say, we'll do that later. We can pop up and say, last builder was created, right? But we can also get an error back now. So how would we handle an error? Well, we'll figure this out later where we actually send the error to the form, but you can actually do this now. Okay, so that's very cool. Now we can actually start handling what to do if there's a user returned compared to an error. So let's see if this actually works inside the dialog now. So if I open my create user here and I just create a user, and let's just take an email I know already exists, and I press save. What? But Lars, you just told us that it was working now. But it is. Notice the users are not showing up because one problem we still have is this component on its own is actually still hiding everything as soon as I click submit. So let's figure that out now. But notice when the error came, you actually didn't see the users list and the user is not created. So it did work, but we need to make more fixes to make this work properly. So let's go back to the code. Now we fix this part inside the create user component, so the users component here, but we still have problems inside the create component because as soon as we're actually saying the form is valid, we just hide everything and clear everything right away here. Right away, as soon as I click the create button, the create user create component resets everything and hides itself. That's bad. We're going to say, I don't want this to be done from inside the component. I don't want you to clear yourself from inside the component. So I don't want you to take care of this yourself. I want to take these and give them as inputs. Let me just move these to the top. Like this, because I want them as inputs. I'm just used to having my inputs in the top. And what I want to do is I want to say, instead of actually letting the user create component take care of this itself, whoever is using the user create component is going to pass these in as input, right? So we're going to say, I can explain to the component when to hide, and I can explain to the component when this guy needs to be reset. Let me show you what that gives us, what capability that gives us. So going into the users component HTML file, this user create now has two new input fields. So now I can actually add an input field here called creating user. Now that has to be the same as the actual local creating user Boolean value we have inside our TS code. So now this is mapped to this guy now, right? So instead of having it mapped to its own guy, now it's actually mapped to this guy. Let's save that for now. And let's add one more thing, and that is we also have to now have a user available from the outside. And that user can just map to something called user that we're going to build down here as well. So now we have a creating user, and we're also going to get a user here that's going to be of the type user, and we're just going to instantiate that guy in here to avoid explosions of null pointers inside the create component. So here we have the new user. There we go. Now those changes were needed to actually, if we go back now and give it a second, now the plus sign is back. But when I press plus now and I say LJB, I use this terrible email that already exists. I type in a password, hopefully, that I can actually type in again. I don't know why I can't do this the right way. There we go, and then I do a save. Notice I stay here now, because I'm actually getting an error. To make that more clear to you, let's actually say if we do have an error, let's console log it. Console log the error, just to show everybody that we actually have an error. So I'll save. And notice here's the error actually. Let me just zoom down here. So I actually got an error back saying this email is already in use by another account. Now that of course we're going to show up here. But notice now we actually have real authentication. So that's pretty cool. So next lesson we're going to show that actual error message. But notice again, by moving the responsibility from the create component to handle this user and creating user itself, like it did before in the onSubmit, we now can have full control about the user component inside our users component, right? So now that has full control about the user create, the DOM component. So now we're pretty much done. We just need to show that error validation and then we actually have real errors that we can use for something real in our application. See you next time where we'll actually finish up the form.